So our next storyteller this afternoon is Almahz Negash. And Almahz, you're an educator, entrepreneur, engineer, public servant, world traveler, and lover of all things coffee and cats. We have that in common. Yes. You work as an engineer, a power analyst for Tacoma Public Utilities, and you're also the co-founder of N3 Solutions, a local startup that develops, markets, and manages innovative, community-focused energy services and economic development solutions. In your free time, which I'm surprised that you have any, you manage a free legal clinic at the Muslim Community Resource Center. So, with all of this going on in your life and so much service to others, how has your family and your mother, your family history, how has that inspired and supported you in the work that you do?
You know, I don't think that it's possible to tell my story without telling the story of my mother. I don't think I would be, I know I wouldn't be the person that I am if I weren't raised by the woman that I was raised by. And if she wasn't raised by the woman she was raised by. And so I start my story in the mid-1800s, which is as far back as I can go. And I consider myself a strong woman from a line of strong women. And the irony is that I'm holding a tissue here because I have never gotten through this story without tearing up, but I consider myself strong, though I tear up. My great-great-grandmother was Katie Cook, and I wish I knew more about her. What I know is that she was born a slave, and that I've always hated that was the only thing that I knew about her. And I only saw one picture of her. But she had a daughter, Jessie, who my grandmother loved dearly, and she passed on that love to my grandmother, and my grandmother took that love and passed it on to my mother. And each generation of women in my family took something strong from their mother and passed it on. For my mom, it was her sense of justice. She was a strong advocate for justice. She grew up in the 60s. She was a Black Panther. She was all about civil rights, and she raised every last one of her kids in that. She became Muslim when she was 19 years old, and so how she taught us justice was the way we learn it in our faith. And that is, if you see an injustice, you change it with your hands. And if you can't change it with your hands, then with your voice. And if you can't with your voice, then at the very least, you hate injustice in your heart. And you speak out against it, even if it's against yourself or your family or the ones that you love. And that was what my mother raised us with every single day, and we lived it. So I was a kid in the 80s. Yeah, I'm old. I was a kid in the 80s, and my mom homeschooled me when she was teaching us about world events and injustices around the world and apartheid. There was nothing we could do about apartheid in South Africa, but we prayed. We prayed nightly for South Africa. That's my earliest memories are praying for South Africa. There was nothing else we could do. But she also showed us how to use her voice. Police brutality is nothing new. My mother lost her brother to the Los Angeles Police Department. We were always protesting when there was a death of a young Black man by police brutality. We protested, we were in the streets. I grew up protesting, and I haven't stopped doing that. And she also taught us to use our hands as well. I grew up in Adelanto, California, and at the time it was racist, and it was a racist place to live. And there was one time my mom took a friend to go use a telephone booth, and I keep making references that make me sound old. But we went to go to a telephone booth because we didn't have long distance in our house. And my mom's friend is standing there using the telephone. We're sitting in the car waiting for her. And a white guy comes up in a truck, revving his engine and trying to intimidate her. He starts yelling at her, get off the phone, he wants to use it. And my mom, once he started to get threatening, She jumped up out of that car, she opened up the trunk, and she grabbed the first thing she could find, which is some random piece of metal. And when that incident was over, we all laughed because nobody knew what the heck that metal was. It was just some piece of random metal. And she picked it up, and she positioned herself between this man and her friend. And if he got out that car, she was going to fight. But he didn't get out. He drove off, but not before saying that he was going to go get some more KKK people. Now, I grew up in a racist town. This is not the first time that I heard about racism, but it was the first time that I encountered someone who claimed to be from the KKK. And I said, are we going to stick around, Mama, until he gets back? And my mom said, girl, please. You think he's gonna go tell his boys that 2 black women in a car of kids chased him away? We ain't going nowhere. And we stayed. She used. Yep. And she taught me to stand up for myself despite the odds. And so of all of those, we had so many instances of that through life. The one thing that I decided to inherit from my mother was the firecracker. Like when I see injustice, I want to go out and change it with my hands. Like I jump to that one first. But it's had interesting results throughout my life. And the most recent one, the one that's on my mind and on my heart right now, has to do with workforce and equity. Now, it's no surprise to any of you here that women in engineering and STEM fields in general are discriminated against. I've always overachieved. I have a PhD in electrical engineering, and I don't need that for the job that I have. But I never thought that I would experience this type of workforce inequity. But about a year ago, we had a reorganization at my job. And I had made it very clear to the managers that I intended to take my boss's position when he moved out of that role. So about a week after we have this conversation, the section manager sends out an email saying that he was promoting the former boss of mine into leadership and demoting his former role. And so I went and I talked to the section manager and I said, so are you asking the black woman to do the white man's job for 76 cents to the dollar? Point blank, I said that. And like I said, I'm a firecracker, right? I go straight to probably making people defensive, which is exactly what happened. And so he locked up, he sent me to HR. I ended up going to his boss, and I was talking to middle management, I was talking to executive leadership, senior leadership. I was all the way up to the CEO, and you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. For 10 months, I told them, I showed data. We have quarter after quarter after quarter, we get reports that show women, as we go up in our organization, we do not get compensated to the same level as our male peers. Data I brought, nothing happened. And it's months and months and months. It's enough to make you go mad, but I didn't, because this ain't my first rodeo. So when I was 19, and I'll tell you 2 stories about how I've been impacted and why I am able to persist. When I was 19 years old, I went with my sister here and my other sister. We traveled the world teaching English and studying language. The first place we went, I was 19, was Sudan. And we studied Arabic and taught English there. And after I had studied Arabic, we started to take classes in Arabic so that, to really perfect our language skills. So I was taking some psychology class that required me to go to the library. And so I went to the library and wanted to go in, and they said, no, it's Tuesday. And I'm like, what? At this particular university, women were allowed to go to the university for 1.5 days a week, and men got 5.5 days, and I came on the wrong day. And I wasn't having it. I was like, oh, no. And I went back to my class. I grabbed me a piece of paper. I was completely unorganized, but I just like, we're protesting. We're going to do a petition. And I just got all of these names. I went to all of my classmates, and I was like, sign your name on this paper. They are not doing this to us. I went to the professors with that long list of names. I went to admin. I ended up at the dean's office. And when I walked in, he said, he must have known I was coming. Which is like, Almahz, you are so nagnaga. Do you know what nagnaga means? And so I didn't trust what he was going to say. So I went and asked my neighbor, and I said, the dean of the college just called me nagnaga. He says it means persistent, but what does it mean? And she cracked up laughing. She was like, yeah, it means you're a nag. So yes, I had the dean of the university call me a nag for asking for equal access to the university. I was only in Sudan for a brief period. I ended up leaving. Do you know what happened? Absolutely nothing. However, I came back 3 years later. I came back 3 years later to visit some friends. I had gone to China for several years and then came back through Sudan. I found out that in the time that I was gone, they built a new library for women. Their purpose for having that, that breakout of days was so they can have gender segregation, like men and women had classes separately. So they fixed it by just building a brand new library for the women. So while I never saw justice for myself, I was persistent, and eventually the women that came to that university after me were able to benefit from that library. So I remembered that story. And then I also remembered a story from when I was even younger. My stepfather had become an abusive man. And when I was about 10, he pulled a gun on my mom, a shotgun on my mom. And of course, I'm not lying when I say I'm a firecracker, and you could not tell 10-year-old me that I couldn't take down a grown man with a gun, but the truth is that I couldn't. But I saw my mom use her voice in the most amazing way. My mom was a clinical psychologist, and she talked him down, and we got out. Eventually, years later, she was the most forgiving human being. She forgave him. She helped him rehabilitate, and he ended up becoming a better human being. And for years, he begged her to take him back, but she wouldn't take him back. And when I was having a heart-to-heart with her one time, I asked her, he's reformed. Like, why did you never take him back? And she said, sweetie, sometimes you have to make things better for the next person. She's like, I've made him a better person for the next woman. He's not for me. So she had the wisdom to know sometimes you don't get justice for yourself. You fight for someone else. And I wish I had that. Like, that was a lesson I had at 10 years old, but the significance of it never really resonated with me until I found myself fighting all the time. And sometimes justice is delayed. And so even though it's been months and months, and here I am still fighting at work, I will not stop. I will never give up my voice. I will always continue to persist, because even if I don't get justice for myself, somebody is. And I don't have kids. Like I said, we each inherited something from our mother, but if I give something to your kids, I would say, be Nagnaga. Yeah.